Hey folks, Mark Levin here. Now, before we dive in today's episode, I want to talk about something truly valuable, protecting your financial future with gold. It's called diversification. Now, for that, I only trust Advantage Gold. They're the real deal with 5-star service and a sterling reputation. So give them a call today. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. Trust me, you'll thank yourself in the future. Now let's get to the show. Results may vary. Consult with your financial professional.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
It's Larry O'Connor sitting in for the great one, Mark Levin, today. 877-381-3811. I am the morning host on WMAL in Washington, D.C., and always privileged to be able to sit in for the great one. Today, of all days, my understanding is that he is undergoing his procedure as we speak right now to repair the damage done to his leg from that fall he's been talking about. You know he was been in great pain for a week. Now, please say a prayer for Mark and for Julie as they go through this process this evening, and as soon as if we get any reports on how he's doing and what the recovery is looking like, we'll let you know. But I know he's been in a lot of pain, and these are horrible circumstances. Whereupon I find myself sitting in his incredibly powerful chair behind his incredibly influential microphone. I will do my best, I promise you. I will say this about myself by way of introduction: after years and years and years of training, and probably hundreds, if not thousands, of attempts, I still cannot fold a fitted sheet. And it's just not going to happen in my lifetime. And I think everyone in my life who expects me to be able to fold a fitted sheet is going to have to just come to terms with that. I don't understand how you're supposed to do that. There's no corners on it. And if you try to actually make it work, it just bunches up. So I just want to be clean with you, come clean immediately at the beginning of this 3-hour escapade we're about to participate in. Also, I don't know if you saw the news today out of the Middle East, but there are many, many Hezbollahs who are, well, missing their bollahs, as it were, as their pagers were just blowing up all day. I mean, literally blowing up. Not like in the 90s when your girlfriend was trying to reach you and you were busy doing other things. Literally blowing up. And, of course, terrorists were keeping their pagers in their front pocket. And, well, you can connect the dots there. We will no longer refer to them as Hezbollahs. We will just call them Hezes, since they have lost at least one of their 2 bollahs in this inexplicable and mysterious malfunction. Someone's got to pay the price over at Motorola on this one. We will give you the details of that remarkable story coming up a little later. Also, we're going to walk down memory lane when it comes to Joy Reid and her attempts to tone down the violent political rhetoric in our country. And no, it wasn't after one of the 2 terrifying assassination attempts on Donald Trump. No, this was after a very successful violent attack against Steve Scalise and other Republicans when they were practicing for the congressional baseball game. We'll remind you of how she approached that somber occasion. Also, Jean-Pierre at the press briefing today was an embarrassment, and we'll get into those details. But we begin tonight, sadly, unfortunately, I regret, but we must. We begin tonight with the sad fact, the reality, that the nominee for president for the Democrat Party, the woman who actually didn't gain any votes, not a single one, during a primary process that was rigged and fixed for the incumbent Joe Biden until he wasn't the incumbent anymore. And a small handful of very powerful people in the Democrat Party, along with a very small handful of very wealthy donors, decided they would place the current nominee, Kamala Harris, as the next president of the United States. I regret to inform you that that woman is, in fact, a bumbling, fumbling, incoherent nincompoop. There's really no other way to describe it. She sat for her, I suppose, third interview of sorts today. The first was actually a partner affair with her pal Tim Walz there, the tampon king out of Minnesota. That was with Dana Bash, as J.D. Vance properly described it, a multiple choice affair where the questions had many acceptable answers embedded into them so that Kamala and Tim could actually take their choice and decide which ones they were going to repeat back to Ms. Bash. The second interview was the 10-minute exchange with a local news reporter out of the ABC affiliate in Philadelphia that then got edited down to 2.5 minutes in a very, very generous edit, I'll have you know. A very generous edit where she was, well, I'll tell you how bad that interview was. The Trump War Room Twitter feed that pulls a lot of video and promotes many moments of Trump and of Kamala Harris for supporters of the former president. They put the entire 10-minute video out there intact, in whole, from beginning to end, and describe it as their latest ad for Donald Trump. Just sit and watch Kamala Harris for 10 minutes, and you will be compelled to vote for her opponent. That was the second interview. Now, today's third affair isn't really an interview. It's a candidate forum of sorts with the National Association of Black Journalists. Now, you remember that Donald Trump appeared before the National Association of Black Journalists at a very large, well-attended conference. I believe several thousand people in the room at the time. And, of course, the questions were hostile, obnoxious, despicable, divisive from beginning to end. I think the first question was, why are you, in fact, the spawn of Satan? Please explain. You will not be surprised to discover that today's questioning was a little lighter on the Democrat nominee. There were 3 journalists there representing the National Association of Black Journalists in a much smaller room, a much more controlled environment, and Kamala Harris still fumbled in every possible way. The first question, the most important question, and by the way, a repeat question of the debate and the aforementioned interview with the local ABC affiliate in Philadelphia: are people better off than they were 4 years ago? Now, to be fair, in Philadelphia, the question was phrased, please name 1 or 2 specific things that you can do to help the economy. And, well, here's her answer to that question.
Are they better off now than they were 4 years ago?
So when we came into, well, first of all, let me just say it is good to be with the National Association of Black Journalists, and I thank you for the work you do and that your members do every day.
It's at this moment when Kamala Harris realizes that the longer she takes to say anything other than addressing the actual question, the faster the time that is allotted for this interview will go by. She's a brilliant, brilliant master at this strategy. We call it word salad oftentimes, although word salad at least suggests that there's something good for you at the end of the meal. You know, at the very least, some roughage to get things flowing in the colon. But sadly, you're going to be all stopped up and needing some X-Lax after an hour and a half of Kamala Harris's word salad. There ain't nothing good for you here, not even the fiber and the happy feelings it provides. No, she's just going to filibuster for a while and spend a lot of time saying nothing.
It is very important that we ensure that this organization and your members always have the resources and the platforms to deliver the voices that must be heard. So I thank you for hosting me today.
By the way, that's a tacit promise that you'll get some grants from the Kamala Harris administration going forward. You hear that? We want to make sure that your organization has resources is a funny little word in Washington, D.C. Whenever somebody, first of all, nobody spends money in Washington, D.C. There's no such thing as spending. It's investing. And it's never money. It's resources. So by the candidate for president ensuring the National Association of Black Journalists that she will make sure that they have resources going forward, it's a way of explaining that we'll figure out a way to give you a little something at the end of the day. You do your part, and I'll do my part. All right, so again, the question is, are people better off than they were 4 years ago? And, of course, it's a question about the economy.
4 years ago, when we came in during the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Now, that's not true. There wasn't unemployment. There were people who were not allowed to go to work, which is not the same thing. In some of our largest states employing some of the most Americans in the country, meaning California, New York, Illinois, 3 very populous states. Add to that Virginia, right outside the nation's capital, that employs a lot of people as well. Those 4 states, were controlled by allies of Joe Biden and the Democrat leadership. One-party rule across the board in those 4 states. And those governors refused to allow businesses to open and refused to allow people to go to work. That's not unemployment. That's totalitarian regimes forcing businesses to shut down. All right? And everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. And it would have been a great moment at this exchange for one of the representatives of this august and important organization, the National Association of Black Journalists, to actually act like a journalist and lean forward and say, excuse me, Madam Vice President, I'm going to let you finish. But when you say we had the worst unemployment, you're making it suggest as though the economy was falling apart. The economy was strong and robust until the COVID-19 pandemic, which we still have never gotten an answer for in terms of its origins and why the decisions that were made in this country. You know, like social distancing, that thing that shut down so many businesses, social distancing, a protocol that even Anthony Fauci now in retrospect says, I don't know where that came from. I don't know whose idea that was, but boy, it sure did wreak havoc, didn't it? I was sitting there and I see the CDC come out with this social distancing thing, and I'm thinking, how are we supposed to function with this social distancing mandate? You can't run a business with that kind of social distancing, and you certainly can't run an election. I mean, how can people stand in line at their local polling place at an elementary school or a library or post office and cast their ballot if you got to keep everybody 6 feet apart? So we better do mail-in ballots and drop boxes and ballot harvesting and all that stuff we've never done in an election before in this country because, well, you know, election integrity, those kind of things open up the door to a whole lot of shenanigans. But it was all done shutting down businesses, stifling the economy, keeping people out of work, and yes, radically changing all of our election security protocols. It was all done under the guise of social distancing because of the pandemic. And here I am, Anthony Fauci, the top doctor in the country with regard to public health policies, and I have no idea where social distancing ever even came from. Yeah, that's what she's describing as our worst unemployment in history. So she's setting the table here to answer the question, and I remind you again, it was, are people better off than they were 4 years ago? So first thing you need to know is that we had the worst unemployment ever, which is a lie. I just explained why that's a lie.
We came in during the worst public health epidemic in centuries.
I think the people who died during the Spanish flu of the early 20th century may quarrel with that, including all of the children who thankfully were not subjected to the COVID-19 pandemic. But that's okay. This isn't a history lesson. The question on the table is, are people better off than they were 4 years ago? Please answer.
We came in after the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
I think the 3,000 lost souls on September 11th, 2001 might quarrel with the 6 hours of mayhem on Capitol Hill on January 6th being the worst attack on our democracy, as she puts it, since the Civil War. But that's fine. You're laying down a great premise full of fake straw men. We get it. You learned from the best, Barack Obama. Could you please answer the question? Do I need to remind you what the question was? Okay, one more time. Are people better off than they were? You know, when somebody avoids a question like this, you know that the answer is not working in their favor. But the question is, are people better off than they were 4 years ago?
And a lot of it due in large part to the mismanagement by the former president as it relates to COVID and obviously January 6th. And we had then a lot of work to do to clean up a mess. As of today, we have created over 16 million new jobs, over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. We have the lowest Black unemployment rate in generations. We have invested in small businesses, and they're to the benefit of many people, but including Black small businesses, some of the highest rate of creation of new Black small businesses.
She goes on, and we'll play a little bit more of it, but suffice to say, I didn't hear an answer. Did you hear an answer? I mean, you'd think with all those great statistics, she'd just say, yeah, people are better off, but she didn't. Why didn't she say, yes, people are better off? We'll delve into it in just a moment. And more from our babbling, bumbling, stumbling, filibustering nincompoop of a vice president, and God forbid, a woman who wants to be president just 50 days from now. We'll get into it in just a moment. I'm Larry O'Connor, in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin.
The cracks in our economy are widening by the day. We've got a labor market that's cooling faster than expected. Unemployment jumped to the highest since the end of 2021. The market could be in free fall any day as investors panic over a potential recession. Now, some bank stocks are getting hammered as fears of a downturn grow. Even the Fed is talking about rate cuts to prop things up. In uncertain times like these, you need a solid plan for your wealth. That's where gold comes in. It's been the ultimate safe haven for as long as we've used money. And when it comes to gold, I trust Advantage Gold. They're a top-rated American gold company and can help you protect your hard-earned money. Call Advantage Gold now at 800-900-8000 for a free gold investment kit and to see if you qualify for $1,000 in free silver. Don't wait. Call 800-900-8000 today. That's 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. That's 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
Larry O'Connor in for the great one, Mark Levin. Tonight we're going over this candidate forum Kamala Harris engaged in at the National Association of Black Journalists. I just played with you a rambling, incoherent answer to the basic question, are people better off than they were 4 years ago? And you heard she has to set up her answer by telling everybody how awful things were when she came into office. Which, by the way, is pretty remarkable. I'm got to say, I got to hand it to her for acknowledging that she's even in office right now, because she's been running as though she's trying to get rid of the guy who has currently screwed everything up, hoping that people don't even realize that she's currently our vice president. But, you know, it's funny how she has to do this. It should be a simple answer, right? Yes, we're better off. But she can't say that. You know why she can't say that? Because nobody feels that way. And she doesn't want to do what her predecessor, Joe Biden, did when he was running just a couple of months ago. Yeah, it's only been a couple of months. When he was saying we have the strongest economy in the world. People have no idea how great of it. And I mean, that's what she was saying. We've got the clips of her over the last year or so saying Bidenomics is working. It's working, and it's fabulous. We love our Bidenomics. Don't you notice how they don't even use the word Bidenomics anymore? The last thing they want you to remember is that old desiccated fool in the White House right now who can barely put a sentence together, let alone run our nation. So they don't even say Bidenomics. But why does she have to spend all of her time telling people about how we had people out of work and how we had issues and everything? Because the American people are not comparing where they are right now to where they were at the height of the pandemic. They're comparing where they are right now to where they were when everything was great under Trump, because they don't blame Trump for the pandemic. More of this coming up in just a moment. She was awful today, and you're going to hear every bit of it.
This is Mark Levin with an urgent message. We are living in grave and dark economic times that are going to get worse. We just saw an abysmal jobs report while unemployment shot up to the highest level since the end of 2021. Meanwhile, the stock market looks like a gamble. Many banks are getting crushed as recession fears mount. The S&P Banks Index fell 2.4% in a single day. That's a lot. Regional banks fell nearly 3%. That's even more. These are bad signs. Even the Fed is talking about rate cuts. You need to protect your wealth. That's where diversification and gold comes in. It's been a bedrock of wealth preservation for centuries. And the best company I know of is Advantage Gold. Their experts can help you protect your savings from economic chaos. Call now, 800-900-8000 for a free gold investment kit and see if you qualify for $1,000 in free silver. That's 800-900-8000. Don't wait. Call now. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
Yes, it's true that Mark Levin is the fastest growing radio show in America. The Mark Levin Show is on at 877-381-3811.
It's Larry O'Connor in for the great one, Mark Levin, today. You can follow me on all social media platforms, Larry O'Connor, that's with an O-R at the end, and YouTube, where I do a daily show for Town Hall Media, as well as my morning show out of Washington, D.C. on WMAL, O'Connor and Company, with the great Julie Gunlock and Patrice Onwuka and Mercedes Schlapp, Molly Hemingway, a whole host of rotating guest hosts that come in on Thursdays, but Julie and Patrice are my permanent co-hosts. It's a great show. You'll love it. All right. And by the way, thank you for all the tips on how to fold a fitted sheet. I still don't get it, nor will I ever. Earlier today, J.D. Vance sort of telegraphed what to expect from Kamala Harris at this candidate forum. It's a great moment. You need to hear it. Here's J.D. Vance explaining how Kamala Harris addresses questions with regard to the moribund, failed economy that has occurred under her watch.
They'll say, well, Kamala, Vice President Harris, what is your plan to lower the inflation caused by your policies? And she'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. I believe in small business. And then everybody with an ounce of common sense is saying, well, you didn't answer the question. Or Kamala Harris, your policies led to an increase in energy prices, an increase in housing prices. What are you going to do to change that? Give us the specific idea of what you're going to do. And she'll say, well, when I worked at McDonald's, I loved making hash browns. And all the American people want, I think, from a person who would pretend to lead them is to actually answer some tough questions and stand before the American people and ask for their vote. And that's what she refuses to do.
He's absolutely right, of course, and he's very good at what he does. And the more I see him, the more I like him. J.D. Vance, Ohio senator and running mate for Donald Trump. And sure enough, earlier today at this forum for National Association of Black Journalists, she got a follow-up question to the first one that she refused to answer, which was, are people better off than they were 4 years ago? She said, well, all right, then just answer this. What can you do to help people who are suffering right now in this economy? And the answer?
And here's my personal experience coming at that. I grew up a middle-class kid.
Oh,
my mother was hardworking. She raised me and my sister Maya.
Here we go.
She saved up, and it was only by the time I was a teenager that she could afford to actually buy her first home.
Well, I feel better now about her ability to fix the economy. The folks over at the Trump War Room X feed actually put together a beautiful montage here. As I've mentioned, there's only been a couple of instances where Kamala Harris has deigned to actually answer any questions. Here are three moments, one from the debate, one from a one-on-one interview with a local ABC news reporter in Philadelphia, and one from today, all asking the same question about the economy. Notice if you see a pattern of behavior here.
When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
Are they better off now than they were 4 years ago?
Making life more affordable for people. What are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid.
I grew up a middle-class kid.
There you go. Yeah, it's easy. I don't know why she doesn't do more interviews, because when you can answer every question with the same scripted, rehearsed answer, it's kind of an easy process, isn't it? And if that weren't enough, by the way, earlier today in Georgia, Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate for Kamala Harris and the Democrats, was actually asked the same question. What do you tell people who wake up each morning worrying about the state of the economy?
Inflation. Yeah. Let's start with inflation. What do you tell people who wake up, frankly, each morning wondering, how am I going to get by financially?
Yeah, I tell them, Kamala Harris and I know something about it. It'd be middle-class folks. Our families sit at the table trying to pay the...
Does that qualify as an answer? Every single time. This isn't an accident. This is planned. This is rehearsed. Does that work with anyone? Every single time. Oh, what can we do to help with the economy? What is our solution for inflation? Let me explain something to you, because I grew up in the middle class. Yeah, by the way, they're all basically roughly my age-ish, I guess. We're all Generation X here, right? At least I am, and Walsh and Kamala Harris are as well. Let me tell you something. This whole I grew up in a middle-class family, if they grew up at the same time I grew up, which they did, they grew up in a middle-class family, and they're talking about how, we had to scrimp and we had to save, but we had a fairer economy, an economy that worked for all of us, and eventually, as you hear from Kamala Harris, my mom was able to buy her first house, and we were able to do this, and we were able to do that. Yeah, you know what scenario that was that they grew up in? When it was rough for them and they had to scrimp and they had to save, it was under Jimmy Carter. And then when the economy got better and stronger and fairer when they were growing up, when they saw their parents able to exceed in the middle class and buy their first home, it was under Ronald Reagan. It was Reaganomics. They're wistfully looking back at the good old days from when they grew up in the middle class and how things were better, and they're not even getting the fact that they're acknowledging the reality that Ronald Reagan was the greatest president of the 20th century. Because those good old days were brought to you by the Republicans and conservative policies. Now, Kamala Harris was asked another question today at this forum. And this one, we're going to take our time on it because it's a deadly serious issue. It has to do with reparations. And again, I want to remind you that this is at a forum of the National Association of Black Journalists. So, as you would expect, Kamala Harris was poised to pander, poised to deliver an answer that would accommodate the audience members of the National Association of Black Journalists. So, here's Kamala Harris being asked, again, a very specific question. If you were president, would you move forward with a commission on reparations for slavery as an executive action, or would you want Congress to do that? Which, by the way, I want to hand it to this journalist. As a journalist myself and somebody who mentors and works with young journalists, that's how you ask a question. You bake into the cake two choices that both accommodate what you're hoping to get in the answer. See, the question is not, should there be reparations? The question is not, what will you do to get us reparations? The question is, all right, you're going to get us reparations. So are you going to do it as an executive action or through Congress? Which boxes the candidate in there, which I have some respect for. Now I want you to take a moment and listen to Kamala Harris's answer, and this is a very, very simple question for the woman who wants to be president. How will you go about ensuring reparations for slavery? Through executive action or through Congress?
Would you, as president, take executive action to create this commission, or do you believe that it should happen in Congress?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, Sheila Jackson Lee, she was an extraordinary leader who we just recently lost, and she was a friend and a real champion for so many issues. So I feel compelled to say that about her.
And I feel compelled to point out, again, a stalling tactic that she employed all day long. The more you can throw more information out there and take your time in answering, the faster the clock ticks away. And this is also a way for her, as a multitasker, to figure out in her brain what exactly she's going to say to this political minefield of a question. And she can sort of put her thoughts together while she says some pablum about Sheila Jackson Lee, who, by the way, rest her soul, was a bit of a lunatic. Here's the answer now on reparations.
On the issue of what we need to do going forward, look.
By the way, I'm going to let you finish, but did you see what she did there? See, a normal human brain would say, on the issue of reparations, because the question was about reparations, and she is answering a question about reparations, and she was about to say, on the issue of reparations, but her brain stopped her, because this person is not actually untalented as a politician. She actually watches her words very carefully, and she knows that every utterance on an issue like this could be a third rail. It could be, as I said, a landmine. So even by saying the word reparations, she could be opening herself up to a political dilemma. So she stops herself. Instead of saying on the issue of reparations, she says on the issue of pause, where we are going forward. It's so disingenuous because she's such an inauthentic, lying politician. But here she is.
Issues. So I feel compelled to say that about her. On the issue of
reparations,
what we need to do going forward. Look, first of all, we just need to speak truth about history in spite of the fact that some people would try and erase history and try and teach our children otherwise.
Some people are trying to erase history. This is a woman who aligns herself with a political ideology that tears down statues, literally tears down statues and renames streets, highways, and parks and buildings in an effort to rewrite history, to whitewash history, to change history. I love that. That she's accusing, that is a veiled accusation of conservatives who want to rewrite history. We're not tearing any statues down. We want to talk about history, all of history. Not the 1619 project bastardization of American history that the left promotes. But I'll let her finish.
We need to speak truth about the generational impact of our history in terms of the generational impact of slavery, the generational impact of redlining, of Jim Crow law. I could go on and on and on. These are facts that have had impact. And we need to speak truth about it.
We need to speak truth about our history and facts about how we... Okay, the question was, will your plan for reparations for slavery be an executive action or a congressional act?
And we need to speak truth about it in a way that is about deriving solutions. And frankly, I think that we, and part of that is studying it to figure out exactly what we need to do. But part of what we can do right now is, for example, what I'm talking about in terms of building an opportunity economy, which is...
Wait. The question was, will you move for reparations as an executive action, or do you think Congress should do it? So please address the question.
Addressing explicitly the obstacles that historically and currently exist and dealing with them. Student loan debt, medical debt, bias in home appraisals. What we need to do in terms of dealing with an issue that I have championed for years, black maternal mortality, which is the fact that black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in connection with childbirth than other women. And we know that the reasons for that include disparities that pre-exist her pregnancy, including disparities that exist in the system during her pregnancy. So all of those things must be addressed.
Great. The question was, with regard to reparations, are you going to move forward with them as an executive action, or do you think Congress should do that?
Do you have a position on whether that should happen, this commission should happen through executive order or via Congress?
Okay, heard all that for the last 2 minutes. None of it addressed the question. Please do so.
I think Congress ultimately will have the ability to do this work. I'm not discounting the importance of any executive action, but ultimately Congress, because if you're going to...
So understand that he finally got that answer, and good for you, young man. Understand something here. This is Kamala Harris, this historic figure, who's bringing such joy to our nation, because that's what they told me was happening during the Democratic National Convention. This transcendent political figure who represents so much to so many who are hoping to turn the page on the old way of politics in this country. The woman who represents as the first potential black female president a generational, racial, and gender tectonic shift in our nation. She is now telling every single voter in this country who does think it's a good idea to have reparations for black Americans affected by 160 years ago slavery in the Civil War. She is saying to them that electing me as president is really irrelevant. Do you recognize what she just said? No, Congress needs to do this. Well, with all due respect, ma'am, what the hell do we need you in the White House for then? If this is going to be something Congress does, by the way, when you were senator, a member of Congress, I don't remember you doing anything about it then. And if you were going to sit there in the Oval Office waiting for Congress to do it, then seriously, what do you bring to the table here? And the answer is nothing. But this is going to hurt her specifically with black voters. And coming up in a moment, she was asked about that. She was asked why black men, young black men in particular, are voicing their support for Donald Trump in numbers that we have not seen for a Republican candidate in 60 years. And her answer will shock you in its moronic stupidity. That's coming up next. I am Larry O'Connor. This is The Mark Levin Show.
Mark Levin.
The cracks in our economy are widening by the day. We've got a labor market that's cooling faster than expected. Unemployment jumped to the highest since the end of 2021. The market could be in free fall any day as investors panic over a potential recession. Now, some bank stocks are getting hammered as fears of a downturn grow. Even the Fed is talking about rate cuts to prop things up. In uncertain times like these, you need a solid plan for your wealth. That's where gold comes in. It's been the ultimate safe haven for as long as we've used money. And when it comes to gold, I trust Advantage Gold. They're a top-rated American gold company and can help you protect your hard-earned money. Call Advantage Gold now at 800-900-8000 for a free gold investment kit and to see if you qualify for $1,000 in free silver. Don't wait. Call 800-900-8000 today. That's 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. That's 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
But polling shows that some black men, particularly young black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
Another good question here, and understand that Kamala Harris, you would think, would immediately push back on the question in the spirit of, well, first of all, I don't accept that premise. I think that I'm actually doing very well with black voters, especially young black men. And if they have any concerns about the economy, well, they should really vote for me because here's plan A, B, and C that will actually make young black men better off than they are right now. She didn't, of course, say that because she doesn't have any kind of plan that would do that in any way whatsoever. In fact, by not pushing back on the premise of the question per se, she actually accepted the fact that young black men right now favor Donald Trump. That's right. You heard me. I said it. That's right. They favor Donald Trump. The Hill had a breakdown of an NAACP poll. Most black voters, 63% of them, plan to support Harris. That's fine, although it is a smaller percentage than most Democrats get. This is from a poll from August 6th to August 12th. But 26% of black men under 50 years old said they support Trump versus 49% who backed Harris. For black men above 50, they get 77%. 67% of black women said they supported Harris. The answer to the question, though, from Kamala Harris on why black men or what she can do to help win black voters?
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying,
you'll hear the rest of it. It's all a lie coming up next.
This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, Deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Good news and bad news, Levinites. The bad news, it's Larry O'Connor sitting in for Mark Levin, and I count myself amongst y'all. And it's just as disappointing for me not to hear the great one. The good news is he is having his procedure to repair the damage done by that terrible accident he had last week. You know that Mark's been going through a lot of pain. And he's been, I mean, God, what a warrior he is to deliver such great content every single night for all of us. We need him more than ever. He had to get this procedure done so that he can alleviate this pain, fix what's broken, and then charge ahead because we cannot do without him. So the good news is he's going to be back, he's going to get recovered, and he's going to be right here where we need him, leading the charge up to Election Day and beyond. But in the meantime, I am Larry O'Connor. I'm sitting in for the great one today. And I'd love to hear from you, by the way, at 877-381-3811. I got a lot to get through, and I will get to your calls. I see a lot of you already queuing up there and waiting for it. I will repeat my complete and total lack of ability to fold a fitted sheet. It has vexed me my entire adult life, and I'm not ashamed to say it out loud. Although I have gotten some good tips here. You can follow me at Larry O'Connor on social media. I prefer to use X now because it's relatively free. And somebody tweeted in to me and said, here's the simple solution on folding a fitted sheet. You take your dirty sheets off your bed. You put them in the washer. You put them in the dryer. You take them out of the dryer. You put them back on your bed. Problem solved. And until I hear anything better on how to fold a fitted sheet, that's going to be my modus operandi going forward. We're plowing through Kamala Harris's dumbfounding appearance, and I stress the word dumb, founding appearance before the National Association of Black Journalists. And I just want to close this loop here on this one very intelligent question, actually, about how large numbers of young black men are considering voting for Donald Trump. They see him better for the economy. And again, the question is, what's your message to young black voters who feel left out of this economy? And, oh, by the way, what can you do to fix the economy? Check out her answer.
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying... Hold on.
She has done one interview since she was anointed the nominee for the Democrats. She's done one interview with Tim Walz. She's done one interview with a local reporter in Philadelphia that lasted 10 minutes. She's done one debate, and now she's doing this forum. What do you mean I often get asked this question? Who's asking her the question? I mean, I guess maybe people on her own campaign staff are asking the question. What can we do? We're losing black voters. Right? Right? Think about this for a minute. I often get asked this question. She famously has not done any interviews. So the question is, black voters are voting for Donald Trump and they're not voting for you. If she has been asked this question so frequently, it has to have been in the last 2 months since she's been the anointed nominee. So is this just a lie? Have we missed some interview that she's given that we don't know about? Or seriously, is this an internal debate that she's dealing with on a regular basis within her own campaign staff or with Democrat donors who are burning up her phone saying, you're hemorrhaging black men? What are you going to do? So let's go back to this answer again, because once I shed that light on it, you realize that all of this that you're about to hear from her is a smokescreen and a lie. She's never been asked this question. We literally know every question she's been asked as the nominee, because there aren't many of them.
These materially change their lives.
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You got to earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am Black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities.
Okay, that obviously meant nothing and was a complete gobbledygook to just kill time because she doesn't have an answer. Because, again, the basis of the question was, what can you do specifically about this economy to help these people? And she, of course, doesn't have any answer in that regard. But then bending over backwards in this patronizing, condescending way to say, I don't take any voters for granted. I shouldn't assume that they're going to vote for me just because I'm Black. Let me tell you something. The basis of that answer is, in fact, embedded into the reality that the whole reason she's there is because she and the power structure of her party have, in fact, taken for granted that she is going to get certain votes because of her sex and because of her race. And everyone knows it. And the fact that that was her initial response before actually saying, because think about this, you're a politician. You want to be president of the United States. You are lobbed a softball across the plate. Black voters are going for Trump because they think he's better on the economy. Change their mind. You would think that you would seize on the opportunity to say, great, here's my plan. Boom. And instead, I just want you to know that I'm not assuming Black people will vote for me just because I'm Black. Okay. I don't think any of us were suggesting that in the question, but could you answer it now? And the reason she went there is because, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what they assume. That's exactly what they're taking for granted. Now, a little later, she was asked about gun policies and the fact that all she seems to talk about is this assault weapons ban. Now, don't forget that this constitutional scholar, this former district attorney, former attorney general, now vice president of the United States, former U.S. senator, who is a champion of constitutional rights in this country, is so ignorant about the Second Amendment and a Supreme Court law that she first had proposed a assault weapon mandatory buyback, which I just love the Orwellian nature of that language. A mandatory government buyback of certain weapons that the government chooses. If it's, first of all, a buyback suggests that you originally bought it from the government in the first place, which you didn't. So it's not a buyback. It's a confiscation that we will then give you whatever amount of money we determine you have any right to have in exchange for us confiscating your weapon, because the government isn't buying back your weapon because they never sold you your weapon, your firearm. Number one. Number two, mandatory buyback. So no. It's not confiscation of your guns. No. It's a buyback program, but it's mandatory. You have no choice. In fact, if you don't surrender your firearm under our mandatory buyback program, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But it's not a confiscation. No. It's a buyback. So the mandatory assault weapon buyback plan that she had when she last ran for president, that campaign where she actually never made it to Iowa because even Democrats loathed her so much that she couldn't even make it to the caucus. During that campaign, she wanted a mandatory assault weapons buyback program. Of course, she's never been able to define what an assault weapon is. Now, the journalist at the National Association of Black Journalists says, listen, crime is killing our community. In Chicago, in New York, in Washington, D.C., in Baltimore, in Detroit, in Los Angeles, it's an absolute nightmare. These are cities, by the way, this is not how the question was asked. I wish it had been. If I could somehow pass for a black journalist at the National Association of Black Journalists, this is how I would ask the question. So please, I'm giving way too much credit to this reporter. But the question should be asked after decades and decades of one-party rule in these cities, run by Democrats exclusively across the board. Young black men are dying in the streets in pools of blood because of violence that goes unabated, and the only answer we've had from elected officials is to defund the police, take a knee, and paint a mural on the sidewalk that says Black Lives Matter. And that ain't working. And now all you've got to say is that you think we should have an assault weapons ban. Well, I'm here to tell you that the young black men in Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, New York, Los Angeles, D.C., and everywhere else in this country are not dying by the tens, hundreds, and thousands on an annual basis because of AR-15s. It's handguns. It's illegally purchased and possessed handguns. But you're catering to this narrow group of white suburban moms who are terrified about school shootings. You don't take their votes for granted, so now you're pushing for this so-called assault weapons ban because it raises you money and gets you great headlines when a white suburban school is shot up, and you're ignoring the real gun crime that's going on in our cities. So set aside the so-called assault weapons for a moment, Madam Vice President. What are you going to do about the gun violence happening in our cities right now? Now, that is how I would ask the question. But she was specifically asked about handguns versus assault weapons, and here was the answer. And by the way, notice in the middle of this response, she gets some pushback because she's filibustering. She's avoiding the question. She's not giving a direct answer. And the reporter says, stop with the word salad. I'm specifically asking you about illegally obtained handguns because that's the problem. That's the actual problem, and you're not addressing it with your ban on AR-15s because you think those guns look scary. Here's the answer.
For someone can buy a lethal weapon if they've been found by a court to be a danger to themselves or others. You might just want to know.
And respectfully, we do understand that.
But you're asking about...
I'm asking specifically about handguns, because many of those handguns aren't purchased in places.
Checks apply to handguns.
Yeah, and by the way, this is a very... this is a very, very, I got to say, well-positioned question, because they all say, oh, we have to do extended background checks, and we've got to do a waiting period, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that. And this woman says, with all due respect, the violence that we are facing every day in our city streets are not from people who have purchased guns from Walmart or from acquired by people who are going to fill out a federal form and go through a mandatory waiting process or a background check, because a lot of them are already convicted felons. They're buying them from the trunk of somebody's car in a back alley. So all these things you plan to do and talk about that you can raise money on from all these well-funded white suburban mom organizations who are terrified of gun violence but don't actually legitimately face it on a regular basis like our community does. What are you going to do about those guns? What are you going to do about prosecuting those people who you've been bailing out under the guise of Black Lives Matter? So good for her to push back on that. Here comes Kamala Harris's answer. This is priceless.
Instances, those handguns aren't even bought lawfully. Yes.
Which is why I also have been very adamant for years. In fact, I myself protested at a gun show probably 10, 15 years ago about the gun show loophole.
I myself personally protested at a gun show. A gun show. Yeah, you know what? Most of those gangbangers in Chicago on the South Side who shoot up the neighborhood and kill little children, toddlers, during drive-by shootings or errant bullets flying through the front window of a person's home there during another round of violence, most of those people went to your local gun show to buy their handgun. Sure, yeah, absolutely. They all line up every Sunday morning at the gun show. Gun show loophole is her answer. She has no answers. She wants to be your president. We answer the burning question on a daily basis here. Why doesn't Kamala Harris do more interviews? And, well, now you know. I'm Larry O'Connor. There's more to come. Keep it here. It's the Mark Levin Show.
Mark Levin.
I'm going to let you in on a little wireless trick that can cut your cell phone bill in half every single month. Other major carriers want you to believe you need unlimited data so they can overcharge you. Here's the fact. Most of you are buying way more data than you'll ever need and you'll ever use. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, only charges you for data you actually want. Listen to this. For $25 a month, you can get unlimited talk, text, and 5 gigs of data plus mobile hotspot. Do you know what you can do with 5 gigs of data? You can browse the internet for 135 hours, stream 1,000 songs, or watch 10 hours of video. Folks, stop overpaying for wireless. Get 5G coverage with Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Switching is painless. It's easy. There's no contract, no activation fee. You can even keep your phone and your number. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/Levin, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month on top of all the other savings when you sign up with Pure Talk.
It's Larry O'Connor in for Mark Levin. I'm sensitive to playing so much Kamala Harris audio here, but listen, it's a rarity. It's like finding one of those white rhinoceroses in the wild that Kamala Harris actually answered questions in an interview setting, hardly a hostile one, though, sitting with the National Association of Black Journalists. But I recognize that continued use of this audio on this radio program, on this, your favorite talk radio station, will potentially result in your ears bleeding out. So we're probably going to call a halt to this. I do want to we got Phil in Virginia who's been waiting on the line to comment on this interview with Kamala Harris and also something specific about her delivery. So, Phil, thanks for calling in. I'm Larry O'Connor. It's the Mark Levin Show.
Hey, I just want to, first off, I want to wish Mr. Levin a quick and complete Godspeed to a quick and complete recovery. And thank you, Larry, for stepping in so that he could go get the treatment.
Absolutely.
But also, when I listen to Kamala's delivery, especially in the early interviews that you played, what I'm hearing is I hear her sinuses are blocked up, and I hear her a lot more relaxed, like chemically relaxed, like she's on a boatload. You said rhinoceros, a rhinoceros load of Xanax, and that she's doing cocaine.
Well, we don't know that, Phil. Now, hold on. Now, you can't use the Mark Levin Show airwaves to make some sort of unfounded... she did used to hang with quite a wild set there in San Francisco and L.A. for a few years, though. But there's no evidence of such a thing, certainly. Although she has admitted that she used to get stoned in college against the law, right, when it was cool. That was when she wasn't busting people and throwing them in jail for smoking a joint. Phil, I don't know if that's the case. Let's take a listen. You know what? We have a nice side-by-side comparison here. Phil in Virginia, thank you for the call. Let's test this out. Here is a side-by-side comparison of Kamala Harris today and Kamala Harris last week answering a question about the economy and whether people are better off than they were 4 years ago. Here's the side-by-side comparison. Let's see if we can pick up on anything.
And here's my personal experience coming at that. I grew up a middle-class kid.
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid.
My mother was hardworking. She raised me and my sister Maya.
My mother raised my sister and me. She worked very hard. She saved up, and it was only by the time I was a teenager that she could afford to actually buy her first home. She was able to finally save up enough money to buy our first house.
Nope, she's not stoned. She's just a fraud.
I'm going to let you in on a little wireless trick that can cut your cell phone bill in half every single month. Other major carriers want you to believe you need unlimited data so they can overcharge you. Here's the fact. Most of you are buying way more data than you'll ever need and you'll ever use. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, only charges you for data you actually want. Listen to this. For $25 a month, you can get unlimited talk, text, and 5 gigs of data plus mobile hotspot. Do you know what you can do with 5 gigs of data? You can browse the internet for 135 hours, stream 1,000 songs, or watch 10 hours of video. Folks, stop overpaying for wireless. Get 5G coverage with Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Switching is painless. It's easy. There's no contract, no activation fee. You can even keep your phone and your number. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/Levin, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month on top of all the other savings when you sign up with Pure Talk.
Love him or hate him or really, really hate him. The Great One is on the air at 877-381-3811.
I'm Larry O'Connor. I'm sitting in for the Great One, Mark Levin. As you know, Mark suffered an injury last week. He's revealed some details about it. He's been in great pain, but great news. He's actually undergoing a corrective procedure on his leg, I believe, as we speak. If you're the praying type, please do so for Mark and for Julie, because, she's got to deal with him during recovery. God bless her. And, I mean, come on. Imagine having to nurse Mark Levin back to health. She's a saint, I tell you, a saint. If you're not the praying type, then you know what? It won't hurt you to say a prayer. Even if you don't believe, what's it going to harm, right? And you never know. You might get something out of it. Maybe a little grace in return. Please do. Pray for Mark. He's going to be fine. He's going to recover. He's going to be back. We need him strong. We need him fit. And we need him out of pain so he can lead us forward right up through Election Day. I'm Larry O'Connor. I'm filling in for him, for Mark Levin. You can find me on my morning radio program on WMAL, Washington, D.C., the mighty, most important, frankly, talk radio station in the nation. No offense to whatever station you're listening to, but Washington, D.C., last I checked, pretty important city when it comes to politics and government and having some significant effect on what goes on in our federal government. So I'm proud and honored to be the first voice on that radio station every morning, Monday through Friday. I also do a noontime live stream show for Town Hall Media. It's called Larry, and it's available on all their social media platforms as well as all their websites. So please check that out. We are still sorting through the fact and the fiction and the reality of the second assassination attempt on the life of Donald Trump in just 2 months. Obviously, much to be said about the Secret Service and their procedures and whether there is a systemic problem in that entity and how quickly it can be resolved, or whether there's some kind of corruption at the highest levels of our government that has been either passively or actively trying to undermine the security of Donald Trump, a man that the leadership of this federal government, this executive branch of government led by Joe Biden, has been labeling a existential threat to our nation since they took power 3.5 years ago. Forgive any of us for leaping to conclusions, but when you hear the constant drumbeat from the leadership of this government, the Biden government, and the Democrats, and every major voice in the mainstream news media, as well as the pop culture media, late night television shows, comedy shows, sitcoms, award shows, the music industry, academia, it goes on and on and on. The cultural Marxists that control language in this country, not to mention the tech oligarchs that run our social media platforms that get to say what is acceptable language and what is not. When you hear from all of those powerful platforms and entities the constant refrain that Donald Trump is an illegitimate president that is only in office because of his treasonous collaboration with America's enemies in Moscow, when you hear that his actions and policies are that of the second coming of Adolf Hitler, which, by the way, if you didn't connect the dots, translates to anyone who supports and votes for that Adolf Hitler is a Nazi. When we hear that over and over and over again, when this president and this vice president candidate for president has no actual solid ideas or policies or agendas of positive change for the American people, but because they so cravenly want to cling on to power, they choose as a political platform the demonization of their political opponent. Because they can't tell you what they can do to help your life, they choose instead to terrify you about the other guy and tell you, yeah, I may not have answers for you, But if you vote for him, it's the end of our country because he's an existential threat to our Constitution and our way of life. He is a dictator. Forgive us after enduring all of that on literally a daily basis for the last 8 years of our lives. If we then witness 2 legitimate and terrifying assassination attempts against that very man, we actually dare to step up and say, maybe you guys should pump the brakes a little. Maybe constantly telling every American, including your most deranged sycophants, that Donald Trump is a threat and must be stopped. Maybe that's actually leading to this unprecedented moment in American history. You would think that less than 48 hours after this latest assassination attempt, that maybe cooler heads would prevail. Maybe the thought process amongst all of those powerful, influential entities I just listed for you would actually revise and reassemble their way of making a case on behalf of their ideas and their politics, instead of merely constantly demonizing their political opponents as the second coming of the Third Reich. But you'd be wrong. Corey Lewandowski, who now works for the Trump campaign, said it best today. I believe this is on the News Nation outlet.
You know, Elizabeth, I think the president is very grateful for the work of the men and women of the Secret Service. He's grateful for those officers who made the arrest. Look, it's obviously a very scary time. We've had now 2 incidences in just over 60 days that have put in called into question, his security. And that is because of the rhetoric that we're continuing to hear on the left and some members of the mainstream media who continue to say that he's a threat to democracy. So on these 2 separate occasions, they seem to be lone wolves, maybe not, but we'll find out. They're taking the law into their own hands. These are, individuals who are looking to harm people because of their political beliefs. There is no role for that in our civilized society, and it must come to an immediate end.
And yet it hasn't come to an immediate end. And I regret to inform you that this rhetoric against Donald Trump, a man that half of this nation, if the election were held today, would vote once again to be our commander-in-chief and lead our executive branch of government, the rhetoric actually has increased over the last 2 days and has been codified and institutionalized at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, not just by Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press spokesperson, but regrettably and disturbingly by a member of the news media. ABC News, the guys who have George Stephanopoulos leading the charge for their unbiased and completely impartial political coverage. The outlet that just engaged in the presidential debate where Donald Trump was falsely and deceptively fact-checked with lies, while Kamala Harris was able to spew lie after lie after lie without any actual intervention from the so-called moderators. Yeah, that ABC News. They've got a reporter named Selena Wang. And Selena Wang basically set up the question today in the press conference in an amazingly deceptive and outrageous way, considering this is a press briefing after the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. Listen to this question.
So do the president and vice president believe that the kind of language that Trump used in those comments I just said are contributing to the tension and divisiveness you just talked about?
Do the president and vice president believe that the kind of language Trump used contributes to the tension and divisiveness? In other words, do you think all the stuff Trump says caused him to be in the way of that bullet on July 13th? Do you think all the language that Trump uses made him a legitimate target for the attempted assassination on the golf course Sunday? Was Trump asking for it? Come on, tell us, Karine. Worse than the question from ABC News' reporter is Karine Jean-Pierre's answer.
It is, look, we're going to be really clear. We've always have been.
I do love it that she does this every time, by the way. Yes, I'll let her finish. I do like interjecting, though, because it's just, I can't let them get away with these lies without comment, because I'm like that guy. Imagine, you'd be sitting next to me imagine sitting next to Tom Brady while watching an NFL game, or like how the Manning brothers do their coverage of Monday Night Football, right? You got somebody who knows the game better than anyone. You're watching the game. They're going to start screaming back at the television. All that. That's how I am with a White House press briefing. I am screaming back at all times at the questions as well as the answers. But when Karine Jean-Pierre says, we've always been really clear about it, let me be clear, we've always been really clear about this. Really, hon? Because here's the thing. If you were really so clear, we wouldn't have to keep asking these questions. It's such a trick. It's such a deceptive trick that everyone in that room falls for. Well, they have been really clear about this. Really? Then why do you even have to ask a question? If they're so clear, you should probably already know the answer. Clearly, you haven't been very clear about divisive political rhetoric because your guys keep calling him a threat to our Constitution. You don't use words like, we have to beat him on Election Day, we have to win the election. No, you use language like, we have to eliminate him. All right, so Karine Jean-Pierre claims that they've always been really clear about this. Okay, what have you been so clear about?
It is important to bring down the temperature, to bring that temperature down of that political violent rhetoric. We've been very clear about that.
Think about what this means. This is the White House saying it's very clear to bring down the temperature of political violent rhetoric. Now, are they saying that we're guilty of it too? Well, of course they're not. When the White House sits there and wags their finger and lectures you about violent political rhetoric, they're not talking about themselves. We're really bad at this. We've got to stop doing all the things we've been doing. No. They're accusing you of being the problem. They're accusing Trump of being the problem.
And we believe, this president believes, let's not forget why he decided to run in 2020, was about that, was about making sure that we bring the country together, that we bring people together, and it was not about dividing.
Yeah, and they're doing a great job of that, aren't they? Because aren't we so united now? When he stood in front of Independence Hall, bathed in a blood-red light, screaming about MAGA fascists, I felt the love, didn't you? When he constantly repeats the lie about Charlottesville, I'm feeling unified. When Kamala Harris on the debate stage claimed that Donald Trump promised a bloodbath if he doesn't win the election, which is a complete and blatant out-and-out lie, don't you feel united? I mean, they've been very clear about this, haven't they? This White House? Jean-Pierre also continued to refer to Donald Trump today from the podium, just 2 days after yet another assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life. She continued to refer to him as a threat, a threat, a threat. What do you do to a threat? You stop the threat. You eliminate the threat. Peter Doocy of Fox News Channel was having none of it. And God bless this man for his courage. And you try being the only guy in the room. Just try it once and see how it is. With these ruthless, mean girls that populate the White House press pool. You try being the only one. Just once. It ain't easy. But he called Karine Jean-Pierre right out on what she'd been doing.
2 days since somebody allegedly tried to kill Donald Trump again. And you're here at the podium in the White House briefing room calling him a threat. How many more assassination attempts on Donald Trump until the president and the vice president and you pick a different word to describe Trump other than threat?
God bless Peter Doocy. God bless that man, and I pray for his courage every single day. That is a perfect question. How many more assassination attempts on Donald Trump until the president, the vice president, and you, Karine Jean-Pierre, pick a different word other than threat? I regret to inform you that Karine Jean-Pierre did not get the message with that question, and in fact delivered what could be one of the most contemptible and enraging responses that we, the American people, have ever had to hear from a White House spokesperson. And you're going to hear that in full in just a moment. These are serious, serious, and sadly dangerous times, my friends, and I'm glad we're in this together. Please don't go anywhere. I want you to hear this next. I'm Larry O'Connor. It's the Mark Levin Show.
Mark Levin.
I'm going to let you in on a little wireless trick that can cut your cell phone bill in half every single month. Other major carriers want you to believe you need unlimited data so they can overcharge you. Here's the fact. Most of you are buying way more data than you'll ever need and you'll ever use. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, only charges you for data you actually want. Listen to this. For $25 a month, you can get unlimited talk, text, and 5 gigs of data plus mobile hotspot. Do you know what you can do with 5 gigs of data? You can browse the internet for 135 hours, stream 1,000 songs, or watch 10 hours of video. Folks, stop overpaying for wireless. Get 5G coverage with Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/LEVIN. Switching is painless. It's easy. There's no contract, no activation fee. You can even keep your phone and your number. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/LEVIN, and you'll save an additional 50% off your first month on top of all the other savings when you sign up with Pure Talk.
It's Larry O'Connor in for Mark Levin, and I want to repeat the question Peter Doocy asked Karine Jean-Pierre today. It's very important, and you'll hear her answer now.
2 days since somebody allegedly tried to kill Donald Trump again. And you're here at the podium in the White House briefing room calling him a threat. How many more assassination attempts on Donald Trump until the president and the vice president and you pick a different word to describe Trump other than threat?
Peter, if anything from this administration, I actually completely disagree with the premise of your question, the question that you're asking. It is also incredibly dangerous in the way that you're asking it, because American people are watching. And to say that from an administration who has consistently condemned political violence, from an administration where the president called the former president and was thankful, grateful that he was okay, from an administration who has called out January 6th, called out the attack of Paul Pelosi, called out and said we need to lower the temperature after the Butler incident, and now for you to make that kind of comment in your question, because your question involved a comment and a statement. And, it is, that is also incredibly dangerous. All
right, so let's just be clear what we learned here from Karine Jean-Pierre, one of the smartest people in Washington, D.C. She and the vice president and the president constantly referring to Donald Trump as Hitler, as a fascist, as a dictator, as a person who must be eliminated and stopped at all costs, calling him a threat. There's nothing wrong with that. But Peter Doocy asking her why she keeps doing that and whether they'll stop, that's dangerous. That's totalitarian thought right there.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
My name's Larry O'Connor, and I'm sitting for Mark Levin today. As you know, Mark had an accident last week. He's been pretty open about the pain that he's been having to endure. But he's, what a warrior. He's been here every night, whenever possible, playing through the pain, as they say, and trying to deliver exactly what we need him to deliver every single night. And the good news is he is on the on the cusp of recovery. He's actually, I think, still undergoing his procedure as we speak to repair the damage done during that fall. He will recover, and he's going to be right back here. We need him back here. He had to take tonight off, of course, for this procedure. Please keep him in your prayers as he goes through this procedure and he begins to mend. And if I may, also pray for Julie, who will have to deal with him as a patient over the next several days. Just, I love Mark. He's an incredible guy, and you would never know it, but he's actually one of the warmest individuals, kindest. I'm probably ruining his reputation here, and I apologize. He is kind, he is warm, he is supportive, he is generous. But good God, can you imagine having to nurse him back to health? Can we even stop for a moment to imagine what a completely and totally insufferable baby he probably is going to be after this surgery? Mr. Producer, am I in trouble for pointing out the obvious here? Is this... I mean, you know it, I know it, the American people know it, we all know it, we're all thinking it. And it's going to be Julie, poor little Julie, on the front lines there, having to take care of him. So please keep them both in your prayers. Mark, we love you. We can't wait for you to be back right where you belong. We need you. You are indispensable right now. You are the only one keeping us sane in this country. I am Larry O'Connor. I'm the morning show host on WMAL in Washington, D.C. That's the mighty, powerful, dominant talk radio station. Here's how great that talk station is in Washington. Mark Levin's there. Mark Levin is on WMAL, of course, from 6 to 9 Eastern every single night, has been there since the first day he began broadcasting on a national basis. I am proud and honored to be part of the morning voice on that show. It's O'Connor and Company, on that station, I should say. It's O'Connor and Company, along with my two permanent co-hosts, Julie Gunlock and Patrice Onwuka, both of Independent Women's Forum. And then on a regular basis, we have rotating hosts on our Thursdays, including most regularly the effervescent Mercedes Schlapp. You know her, of course, formerly of the Trump administration, Newsmax, and CPAC. Molly Hemingway was just in a couple of weeks ago on that Thursday. We always like to keep it a surprise on who Thursday might be. But anyway, that's our humble morning show. You can find it and stream it live anywhere and check out the podcast as well. Also, I do a daily live stream video show for Town Hall, and you can catch that at Town Hall Media, all the Town Hall sites, including Red State, Hot Air, PJ Media, Twitchy, Bearing Arms, and I forgot one of them, and all of the social media platforms. There, that's my plug. Follow me on social media, and I'll try to entertain. I want to revisit this very important exchange today at the White House, where Peter Doocy called Karine Jean-Pierre out, called the Biden administration out on the obvious vitriol and divisive, violent rhetoric we've been hearing from them since day one, since the campaign, really since Donald Trump joined the presidential election campaign in 2015, comparing him to Hitler, calling him a racist. Of course, the increase of vitriol against him during this campaign, he must be stopped at all costs, by any means necessary. He'll be a dictator. He will shred the Constitution. This could be the last free and fair election we have in this country should he win. He'll never leave the White House. And Peter Doocy asked a simple question. This is after, by the way, Karine Jean-Pierre at the press briefing consistently and constantly continued to refer to Donald Trump not as a political opponent, not as someone who was wrong for our country, not as someone who was wrong on policy, not as someone who we have to defeat at the ballot box. No, she consistently called him a threat, a threat, threat, threat. They choose these words carefully. There's a reason why they call him a threat. And Mr. Doocy was having none of it.
2 days since somebody allegedly tried to kill Donald Trump again. And you're here at the podium in the White House briefing room calling him a threat. How many more assassination attempts on Donald Trump until the president and the vice president and you pick a different word to describe Trump other than threat?
Peter, if anything from this administration, I actually completely disagree with the premise of your question, the question that you're asking. It is also incredibly dangerous in the way that you're asking it because American people are watching. And to say that from an administration who has consistently condemned political violence, from an administration where the president called the former president.
All right. So there's Karine Jean-Pierre saying that a reporter asking the question is actually committing a dangerous act. It's dangerous to ask that question in the way you've asked it. It's not dangerous to constantly refer to Donald Trump as a threat, even though he's now had to deal with 2 assassination attempts in 2 months, one of them taking out part of his ear, coming a fraction of an inch of exploding his skull. It's not dangerous to call him a threat. It's not dangerous to call him Hitler. It's not dangerous to call him a dictator. It's not dangerous to say that if he gets elected, it's the end of our country. That's not dangerous. But you bringing it up and asking us if we're going to stop doing that, that's dangerous. And she goes on this litany of, Joe Biden is the one who's trying to calm things down from the moment he actually announced his candidacy. He's been trying to bring us together and unify us and keep us from the divisions that we have. Okay, let's check the record on that, shall we? Could we do a little fact check? Could we do a little fact check on Karine Jean-Pierre? One of my favorite accounts on the X platform, Maze Moore, it's called, M-A-Z-E, a really great video editor who finds really great videos from days gone by. Maze found one of Joe Biden's very first public appearances in June of 2019. This is very early in his campaign for president. This was Joe Biden's remarks at a campaign event. I'm guessing it's either Iowa or New Hampshire, June 2019.
And I think that, look, I believe that the president is literally an existential threat.
All right, there's more. Hang on a second, but I just want to give you all the facts. This is Ottumwa, Iowa, as I predicted. And as Mays points out, this is June of 2019. This is before COVID. This is before January 6th. This is when we had record low unemployment, record low job participation for African Americans, Latino Americans, for women, for Asian Americans. We had interest rates, I believe the housing market interest rates were down to about 4%. We had gas prices around 2 something, if not lower. The Wall Street was, but these were heady times for peace and prosperity in this country. This is pre-COVID, pre-Wuhan lab virus leak, pre-Fauci deciding that our economy had to shut down until further notice or until the election results came in November of 2020. This is when things were pretty damn good in this country. And I'll start it from the beginning. This is Joe Biden's approach to winning the election that year. Because he couldn't say he could fix the economy because the economy was pretty great. He couldn't say he was going to do great stuff for unemployment because there was really no unemployment problem. He couldn't say he could run as a national security president and bring peace and prosperity to the world because there were no real active military conflicts in the world. Russia hadn't invaded anybody like they did under Obama and under Biden's watch. And Donald Trump, along with Mike Pompeo, was engineering peace deals with Arab nations and Israel. The world was at peace and our country was prosperous. So how did Joe Biden make the case to the good people of Ottumwa, Iowa, this warm June day in 2019 about why we had to make a change and how he should be president instead of Donald Trump? What was his platform from day one?
And I think that, look, I believe that the president is literally an existential threat. This is really dangerous stuff, and it's not easy. He's a threat, in my view, a threat to our core values. And folks, the fact of the matter is that 4 years of Donald Trump will be viewed as an aberration in American history. 8 years will fundamentally change who we are as a nation and how we're viewed around the world.
That was Joe Biden. the great unifier, the great uniter, the great peacemaker, the great bring us together candidate for president. From the first day he entered the race, Joe Biden has been demonizing Donald Trump as, I'm sorry, what were the words you used, sir?
You know, and I think that, look, I believe that the president is literally an existential threat.
An existential threat. It's been from day one, and it's been unrelenting, and it's been nonstop, and it's gotten worse from there. That's how he started this. And don't forget, the entire premise of his decision to join the race and run for president, we're told, was because of what he saw in Charlottesville. When Donald Trump called neo-Nazis and white nationalists very fine people, which of course he never did. The entire basis of his vitriolic, divisive demonization of a political campaign was based on a fraudulent lie that he still has not repented from, that he has still not corrected the record, that he still continues to repeat to this day. You want to know how we got here? Joe Biden is how we got here. So forgive me, Karine Jean-Pierre, for not buying into your righteous outrage that Peter Doocy dares to suggest that the constant drumbeat and demonization of your political opponents as an existential threat that must be eliminated and stopped, otherwise he will fundamentally change our nation forever. Maybe that might be contributing to some unhinged individuals from taking action and trying to do away with that existential threat. You would think that the grown-ups over there at major media outlets like NBC News, CNN, ABC News, et cetera, would maybe be a little bit more circumspect about the kind of analysis they've been providing. But you would be wrong. Earlier today on MSNBC, again, just 2 days after Donald Trump faced yet another assassination attempt, just 2 days after that moment, this is what was provided as political analysis on the fever swamp that is MSNBC.
But since 6 January, things have changed. Insurrection, I've said, now's the time to step up. I mean, what are we going to do? We're going to wait until the jackboots are marching down the street and the brown shirts come rolling out? Our kids get enrolled in Trump Youth? Is that the time to start getting involved?
I don't know if you picked up on the subtle allusions in that erudite example of political analysis, but he's calling you a Nazi again, and he's calling Trump Hitler. I don't know. Seems to me they don't seem in any way shy after the latest round of attempted violent attack on Donald Trump. If anything, they seem to be doubling down. If anything, it almost appears as though they want a third try. I'm Larry O'Connor. You're listening to The Mark Levin Show.
Mark Levin.
Larry O'Connor in for Mark Levin. We spent a little time here in this past half hour focusing on the risible political rhetoric coming from Democrats, from Joe Biden all the way down, including members of the media, in what I believe is an obvious instigation of violent threats against Donald Trump. And this whole, it's only coming from one side, but it's Donald Trump is the problem. Here's the thing. Donald Trump's the one who's getting shot at. Donald Trump's the one who's getting shot at by people who use the same rhetoric as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, calling him a threat, that democracy is on the ballot, that this is an existential threat to our country, right? You just heard the clip from MSNBC that specifically used language that alluded to Nazis and jackboot marching down the streets in brown shirts and Trump Youth, right? But this is nothing new for MSNBC. You know, everyone loves to applaud Steve Scalise, the majority leader of the House right now, whenever he makes a public appearance, because he was near death after he got shot by a crazed, lunatic, left-wing MSNBC viewer when he and his colleagues were practicing for the congressional baseball game. Whenever he appears at the congressional standing ovation, we love Steve. It's great. Oh, it was a unifying moment. Let's not forget the reaction hours after Steve Scalise was shot that day. Let's not forget, as he was near death, bleeding out in a hospital room that day, this was Joy Reid, just hours after that violent attempted assassination of Steve Scalise. Here's Joy Reid reacting to it.
This idea that Republicans now have, that they're saying we all have to come together, we have to rally together. When you heard them saying that, what did you hear?
Well, first of all, we should be in prayer and we should be unified.
This is a black minister who that she had on as a guest that deals with, racial issues and race and politics, and he's a protester. He's a man of the cloth, so I'm going to give him a little bit of grace here. But let's get back to Joy Reid.
Friends when it's one of your own colleagues, but like you said, there's a whole country out there, and a lot of people, at least in my Twitter timeline, and it's a delicate thing because obviously everybody is wishing the congressman well and hoping that he recovers.
Sure.
But Steve Scalise has a history that we've all been forced to sort of ignore on race. He did come to leadership after some controversy over attending a white nationalist event.
Oh, sure, we pray for him and everything, and we want him to get better, but he is a racist Klansman, so now what are we supposed to do? Joy Reid got promoted after that to a primetime show.
Plastic conservative fire. The Mark Levin Show. Call in now at 877-381-3811.
My name's Larry O'Connor. I'm filling in for Mark Levin as he is on the way to getting mended and back into fighting form. We need him right here every single night. Leading us. He's our warrior, he's our leader, and he's getting fixed up from the accident he had last week. He's been in a lot of pain, so keep him in your prayers. He's going to be back at it ASAP. It kills him to be away at this time and during this news cycle leading up to the election. So we pray, Mark, that you'll be back as soon as possible. I'm a radio talk show host in Washington, D.C., I work on the D.C. talk radio station WMAL doing the morning show there, as well as a daily live stream that I do, video stream, on all video platforms for Town Hall every day at noon Eastern. Check that out if you could. I also, if I could, I'm very excited and I'm kind of proud because I'm a published author now, sort of. There's a brand new book. It just got released last week. It's called Against the Corporate Media. It's a series of about 40 essays by great writers. Writers that I'm thrilled to be included with, including the amazing Andrew Klavan and Kurt Schlichter and Charlie Kirk and Sebastian Gorka and Nick Searcy and incredibly insightful, greater minds than mine, all writing about the corporate media and about how they have relinquished their responsibility to our First Amendment and to our nation. Because they're no longer a news media, they're no longer a journalistic endeavor. This is the first time I've ever been published in a book. It's been edited and compiled and put together by the great Michael Walsh, and the book is called Against the Corporate Media. It's available now. Over the weekend, the New York Post actually grabbed my chapter in particular and published it, an edited version of it, somewhat truncated, but I want to take a moment to share it with you because it's so important to me that this story get out. I'm a radio talk show host. I'm doing what I'm doing right now, from my articles, my video work, my radio work, my columns. Everything that I do is a brand new career for me. I started in 2009 because I heard about a guy named Andrew Breitbart who was starting a website for people who worked in the entertainment business like I did. I was a theater manager, of all things, working on Broadway musicals. For people in the entertainment business who were conservatives, so they could have a voice, so they could actually exchange ideas and be heard. Because if you're a conservative and you work in the entertainment business, you're not heard. We are inundated and overloaded and shouted down by people on the left. And It is literally a job-killing decision if you want to publicly say that you don't think the same way as the leftists in Hollywood. Well, Andrew Breitbart understood that, and he gave us a platform. It was called Big Hollywood. He rolled out multiple websites, Big Journalism, Big Government, and then that all became morphed into Breitbart News Network, what you know now as Breitbart News. Well, Andrew brought me into this world, and when given the opportunity to write a chapter in this book against the corporate media, I had to write about Andrew. And I had to pick one part of his career that would resonate and represent exactly what he did as a new media visionary, changing the way the news business is done in this country and giving voice to people outside the corporate media gatekeepers at the networks and at the major newspapers. That story is referred to now as Weinergate, the story of Anthony Weiner. And I want to share with you this truncated version of my chapter, if you don't mind. There was a moment during Andrew Breitbart's funeral in 2012 when I purposefully scanned those sitting around me and soaked their faces into my memory banks. I wanted to remember who was there. I wanted to remember the faces of the men and women Andrew had chosen to help to develop and build his new media empire, all while fulfilling his vision of a revolutionary new media paradigm. Greg Gutfeld was there. So was Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, Dana Lash, Michael Flynn, not the three-star general, Michael Walsh, Kurt Schlichter, Matt Drudge, and Dennis Miller. I also saw a couple of congressmen, maybe a senator. I saw a few recognizable actors from film and television, plus a good handful of media types from the traditional corporate mainstream media, the very mainstream media Andrew wanted to single-handedly destroy. Andrew was a visionary, no doubt. He saw a new media world where the gatekeepers would become irrelevant, if not extinct. He saw this new media world emerge firsthand at the moment when Matt Drudge broke the Monica Lewinsky scandal on his rudimentary single-page monochromatic Drudge Report website. With that one story, he saw the networks and the New York Times with their billion-dollar combined budgets reduced to mere spectators to the biggest political scandal since Watergate. If it happened with Lewinsky, Andrew thought, why can't it happen again? Why can't it happen in perpetuity? As Drudge's primary editor, Andrew learned the rhythmic nature of the news cycle, and then in 2011, something extraordinary happened. Andrew didn't just deliver news items and original reporting into the news cycle waves. He personally got caught in the center of a whirlpool of events that would either end with his destruction and perhaps even his arrest on federal criminal charges, or he would be single-handedly instrumental in the downfall of a powerful member of Congress with connections to the Clinton dynasty. This was the Anthony Weiner scandal. It was the evening of May 27, 2011, when Andrew called an emergency conference call of all of his editors. I was one of them. I jumped on, and Andrew informed us that in the past hour, a tweet had been sent from the account of Representative Anthony Weiner, a Democrat of New York, that included a picture of an erection, barely contained within the confines of a pair of snug cloth underpants. There was no doubt the picture was sent from the congressman's account. By the time we were on the phone discussing it, the tweet had been deleted. Andrew had taken a screenshot of it, and several of us, me included, had seen the tweet and could verify that the screenshot was not doctored. The tweet had definitely originated from Weiner's verified account. But how do you handle this as a news story? What exactly had happened? We couldn't claim the picture was sent by Weiner because it could have been someone in his office with access to his account, or he could have been hacked. Was this newsworthy? And if it was, what was the actual story here? During the conference call, we observed Weiner's tweets disappearing before our eyes, as well as the Twitter and Facebook page of the intended recipient of the tawdry image. Weiner then claimed on his account that he had been hacked. We're watching the cover-up, Andrew said to all of us. And as usual, he was right. Of course we have a story here, he said. We have a huge story. A sitting congressman's Twitter account has been hacked with a pornographic image. It may very well be an attempt to frame him. It was either that, or Weiner was guilty of some pretty tawdry stuff, and now he was engaged in covering it up. Andrew personally wrote the headline, Weinergate. Congressman claims Facebook hacked as lewd photo hits Twitter. Yes, that's right. Andrew himself coined the phrase Wienergate. The original post was published late in the evening of May 27th Pacific time. All the articles on the Breitbart sites were timestamped from Los Angeles, since that was Andrew's home and base. Social media exploded. By the time the East Coast woke up the next morning, it was already a sensation. It was Memorial Day weekend, and the usually dormant news cycle was perfectly poised for a story like this. We were tracking how mainstream outlets would cover it, and before long it was clear that the main focus was not on Weiner, but on Breitbart. Weiner continued to stick with his denial and his claim that he had been hacked. Suddenly, reporters started pointing the finger at Andrew. The narrative evolved, and before Memorial Day rolled around, Andrew found himself on phone call after phone call denying that he had hacked the social media accounts of a sitting congressman. But after all, who are you going to believe? A left-wing Democrat politician married to Hillary Clinton's personal assistant, Huma Abedin? Or a right-wing blogger like Andrew Breitbart? Weiner was a darling of the liberal press in Manhattan and Washington. He was a protege of New York Senator Chuck Schumer. Former President Bill Clinton, of all people, had officiated at Weiner and Abedin's wedding. Breitbart was a pariah, and the mainstream media treated him as such. Cable news became obsessed with the story. They thought they could destroy Breitbart. This was their way of finally being rid of the right-wing upstart who made his name, defying their rules. CNN had Andrew on to discuss our story, where Breitbart factually noted that the media should be scrutinizing Weiner and digging into his apparent interest in sharing lewd, lascivious material with very young women. House legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, yes, that Jeffrey Toobin, was then brought on the air to analyze the legal trouble that Weiner or Breitbart might be in, depending on whom one believed. Look, this is a light-hearted story, Toobin said. This is a silly little thing that happened. It's not a big deal. Toobin claiming this is not a big deal is pretty delicious in light of what led to his career downfall a decade later, but we can't repeat those details on the radio. Over on MSNBC, it was Salon's Joan Walsh who piled on Breitbart and turned him and those of us who worked on the sites into the villains of the story. Joan had come to the conclusion that Wienergate was the product of a right-wing smear machine, as she put it, and Andrew Breitbart was the creator and operator of that machine. Corporate journalists at the major established institutions were spending their energy and effort blaming the messenger, blaming Breitbart, instead of pursuing the truth that their liberal hero, Anthony Weiner, actually did this awful, self-destructive thing. The pressure on Andrew was tremendous as Weiner stuck to his story, but cracks were starting to show. By midweek, some reporters noted that Weiner had not contacted the FBI or even Capitol Hill police about the cyber intrusion. He had lawyered up, though. CNN's Dana Bash, yes, that Dana Bash, confronted Weiner on the steps of the Capitol, and his performance in that interview was less noble victim and more obfuscating perp. It was clear that he was hiding something. Weiner's original unequivocal denial had morphed into a weaselly admission that he could not say with certitude that the picture wasn't of him. We had him. We knew we had him. You see, no one knew what Andrew and the rest of us knew. That from an anonymous tip, we knew that Weiner had done this before. We knew he was lying. By the time Andrew infamously took the podium and hijacked Anthony Weiner's own press conference in Midtown Manhattan on June 6th, 2011, the day our tipster story was published, Andrew had been fully vindicated, even if Toobin, Joan Walsh, and the rest of his detractors still refused to acknowledge it. The Wienergate affair best exemplifies the revolution that Andrew Breitbart fought and won in his 3 short years in the public eye. Like the Lewinsky scandal 15 years before, the Weiner story broke online and outside of the self-appointed news gatekeepers. If they had been in charge still, they would have shelved this story. It would have died. But Andrew's new media revolution created the environment where the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the broadcast networks were irrelevant bystanders. Ultimately, the Wienergate story was a media story about how the media missed the news, ignored the news, because its members didn't like what they saw. Even worse, they didn't like the messenger who delivered the news. So they ignored it. They distorted the news so it could fit their preconceived narrative. And finally, this was about how the members of the media memory hold the news. That's evidence, of course, by their willingness to celebrate Weiner's triumphant return to public life just 2 years later. In 2013, when fully rehabilitated, Weiner came a whisker away from becoming the mayor of New York City. He could have easily won the election if it weren't for yet another sexting scandal. Since the Wienergate affair, things have never been the same for the legacy media. The media revolution Andrew began reached full circle when in 2016, a man who was rejected by the editorial boards of 98 of 100 largest newspapers in America won the presidential election. I'm asked often where Andrew Breitbart would stand on Donald Trump. I did know him well. I worked with him closely for 3 years. I considered him a friend, and everyone wants to know, what would Andrew think of Trump? Anyone who tells you the answer to that question is really just speculating, because one thing was consistent about Andrew Breitbart: he was always unpredictable. You may know what he would have said or done about this or that, but you could never really be for sure. But one thing I'm pretty confident of: Andrew would have loved how thoroughly the media was humiliated, ignored, and dismissed by the American people on election night 2016. And without a doubt, he would have relished Donald Trump's no-holds-barred war with the media throughout his presidency. I want to thank the New York Post for reprinting that, again, truncated version of my chapter, my contribution to this book, Against the Corporate Media, 42 Ways the Press Hates You. It's edited by Michael Walsh. Check it out. It's available now. And for those of you who are just now learning that Breitbart News is actually named after a guy, and his name is Andrew Breitbart, and he left us at the age of 43 on March 1st, 2012, well, then I'm really glad that I could let you know about him. And don't let my story that I just shared with you be all you know about Andrew. Go read about him. Go to YouTube and watch his videos of his speeches, of his appearances. Understand how Andrew Breitbart truly changed the way the news media operates in this country, and most importantly of all, he changed the way you, the American people, receive your news, consume your news. You're no longer reliant on Dan Rather. You're no longer reliant on the editorial board at the New York Times or the Washington Post. You have freedom, real freedom, to access news outside of those corporations and outside of those gatekeepers. And you have Andrew Breitbart to thank for it. The man was a giant. And anyone who worked with him and knew him, we will never be the same. My name's Larry O'Connor. This is The Mark Levin Show.
Mark Levin.
It's Larry O'Connor in for Mark Levin tonight. And, of course, I can't stop thinking about Andrew Breitbart now after walking down that brief trip down Memory Lane, and yeah, we miss Andrew every day. I can't believe it's been since 2012 now that we've had to live without him, and I can't believe it's been nearly 4 years that we've been without the late, great Rush Limbaugh. Honestly, those two voices, those two men, those two visionaries, those two revolutionaries, where would we be if we had them with us today? How different would the daily conversation be in this country? Those two warriors that we lost. We should be happy and proud that we had them when we did, and the influence that they had on us. They literally changed our world. And it's another reason why I ask you once again, please pray for Mark. Without Andrew and Rush leading the charge for us, there's a very few left that can galvanize the conservative movement in such a way that bring us together with intelligence, with empathy, with compassion, with understanding, but with a clear vision on what victory needs to look like, and most importantly, what we do with that victory the day after we achieve it. Mark's one of the last men standing now. He is indispensable. Please pray for him as he recovers now, and we can't wait to hear him back right here where he belongs. Thank you for listening. Follow me on social media. I appreciate your attention. I'm Larry O'Connor, and this has been The Mark Levin Show.